about strategy tonight. I will be speaking about urgency. And the urgency today can be summed up in a simple sentence. If Ukraine loses the war, Europe will find itself in direct confrontation with Russia, and under the worst possible conditions. The conclusion is clear. Ukraine must not lose this war. Worse than the executioner is his henchman, said Mirabeau. Those who are not yet convinced that Trump is Putin's henchman should reflect on the latest events. An American peace plan drafted in Moscow, Witkov instructing the Russians on how to better manipulate his boss. An obsession with excluding Europeans from the negotiations. A near total halt to economic and military aid. A new national security strategy that is implacable towards Europe and complacent towards Russia. Today, at best, Europe is alone. At worst, it faces two enemies, Russia and Trumpism. Tomorrow, in the history books, they will no longer say Munich, they will say Anchorage. They will no longer say Daladier or Chamberlain. They will say Trump, who is offering the Russians through betrayal what they have failed to conquer by force of arms, without forgetting, of course, to enrich his family and his cronies in the process. In Europe, a president with such conflicts of interest would be immediately impeached. The MAGA system is shattering all American values and forcing us to rethink all of our strategic thinking, and even worse, to do so in uncertainty, at the mercy of daily changes of direction dictated by the boss's moods. The only continuity in this senseless policy is the repudiation, humiliation, and subjugation of all allies. Churchill said that there is only one thing worse than fighting alongside allies, and that is fighting without them. Trump and his real estate developers disguised as diplomats will realize this the day they find themselves on a crisis-ridden battlefield and discover, to their detriment, that no power in the world can do without allies. Everyone has known this since Athens' defeat against Sparta. Putin's strategic objective is not Ukraine, it's a return to Yalta. He announced this in 2007 in Munich, stating that NATO had to return to its 1997 borders. Listen to Karaganov today. The war will only end when we have defeated Europe. Putin's goal is not to seize territory. It's to take revenge on the West and assert his right to return to a world governed by force. A concert of great powers. Moscow, Washington, Beijing. Alas, this is also Trump's vision. To achieve this, it is necessary to dismantle NATO and the European Union, and the world of NATO and the EU, which seemed unshakable, is proving to be a colossus with feet of clay. Europe is alone, and for the past 3 years, anesthetized by 3 decades of tranquility, hampered by its divisions and the cumbersome nature of its procedures, weakened by its deindustrialization, and terrified by Putin's threats, it has barely managed to avoid the worst. Thanks above all to the heroism of the Ukrainians, it is time to pull ourselves together. The European Union's decision to permanently freeze Russian assets was the first urgent step. Trump intended to seize them for the benefit of a Russia-US front. The aggressor would become a business partner, the victim a profit center. The mediator would keep 100 billion plus a 50% share of the profits, and the European ally holding the assets would see them vanish. That's the world according to Trump. The assets are therefore protected. The second urgent matter is now to use these funds to arm Ukraine, something we have been discussing for 3 years without achieving anything. The United States has cut off all aid. They are selling us the weapons that we are then supplying to Ukraine. There is no more money. If the money is not released in the coming weeks, Ukraine will lose the war. On December 18th in Berlin, France has a historic responsibility. Mr. Prime Minister, ministers, ladies and gentlemen, you must convince the Europeans to release these funds. The third urgent matter is to rearm ourselves. In 2022, 3 years ago, the President of the Republic announced the shift to a war economy. 3 years later,
Has anyone here seen any sign of a war economy? Europe's GDP is 10 times greater than Russia's, and yet we have been unable to provide Ukraine with the same level of armament as the aggressor. What we are offering them is entry into the European Union in 2030 and guarantees once the war is over. Who can believe these promises when we are unable to adequately support the attacked Ukraine today? Who can believe in our rearmament, which presupposes reindustrialization, when in 2 years we have been unable to implement more than 10% of the Draghi report's recommendations?
The increase in the military budget is good news. It follows a significant increase since 2017, which I welcome, but it is a peacetime increase. Allow me to quote, Russia is engaged in a confrontation with Europe. It does not resemble a classic war, but it is a form of warfare. This quote is from Sebastian Lecornu, Minister of the Armed Forces, in his book Towards War, and I fully share your assessment. Mr. Prime Minister, we are at war. In May 1940, while the British Army was in disarray, Winston Churchill appointed an industrialist, Lord Beaverbrook, to head a new Ministry of Aircraft Production. His mission, to produce aircraft in large numbers. By August 1940, England was producing more aircraft than it was losing in combat. Churchill created an interministerial defense industry authority with the power to make decisions, bypass administrative obstacles, and entrust industrialists with the responsibility of producing quickly and efficiently. And it worked, just as the same idea worked when applied to the challenge of rebuilding Notre Dame. What we did for Notre Dame, we must do today for the security of our country. If we truly want to prepare for war, which is the best way to prevent it from happening, we must forget the peacetime procedures and the inertia of the last 3 years in Europe. And we must do it with leaders. The Macron, Merz, and Starmer triumvirate works if we want to sustainably engage all Europeans. We must include the Prime Minister of the indispensable Poland. The last urgent matter is the battle for public opinion, orchestrated by Putin's lackeys, the far right and the far left. It is a miracle that it is still holding up, and that the polls confirm that support for Ukraine is not weakening. The Putin supporters on both sides are attacking the statements of the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces when he says that no war has ever been won by the military alone on the front lines, but by the entire nation. They call themselves patriots, but they are Russian patriots, just as their ancestors were German patriots or patriots of the USSR. The European Union was conceived for peace and prosperity, for the end of history. It was Fukuyama's dream. Its alternative today is either its vassalization and division at the end of a new Yalta, or its transformation into a sovereign power. It must urgently ensure its own security and succeed in imposing a peace plan favorable to Ukraine, as opposed to a plan of capitulation that would prepare the way for future Russian aggression. Finally, it must denounce the unacceptable interference of Trump and the tech moguls in the internal affairs of the Union. Trump is not eternal. He is starting to be defeated everywhere. His popularity rating is in free fall. Elections lost. Virginia, New Jersey, Miami, dissident MAGA. The Epstein affair is sticking to him like a bandage. Latinos are leaving in droves because of the violence of the deportations, and Midwest farmers are victims of the tariffs. As soon as Republican elected officials understand that Trump is no longer helping them win, but is causing them to lose, the ship will start taking on water from all sides. It is time to stop the genuflections and to encourage all those who are increasingly numerous in the United States who have the courage to stand up. Ladies and gentlemen, ministers, we will answer yes to your question. Europe has the means to become again the great power it was for centuries. All that is needed is the will to do so. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.